Wednesday World Economic News. I've mixed things up a bit for this series, so you might find it a bit confusing, but the whole picture should become quite clear. We'll start with the FT Alphaville and Euro senior debt to government spread. This is the amount of extra interest you will get if you go to lend to a bank and become the secured bondholder, those people that people want to give a haircut to, and you get more and more interest. This chart goes back to 01. It goes back 10 years and it jogs along merrily, spikes up at the time of the 2008 bank problems, starts to come down again, but it started to go up again as Germany is saying that these people should get haircuts. This whole thing is, where is the money going to come from? Next, Eve Smith gives us Newt Gingrich, touting state bankruptcy bill to gut pensions. There has been an interesting lack of commentary on an effort underway by Newt Gingrich and his allies to enable state governments to declare bankruptcy as a way to slash pension obligations, and given the lack of mention of other creditors, perhaps only pension obligations. I can't explain everything, but you can imagine what that's all about. The Sacramento Bee, Nick's favourite, Brown's Countdown. Day 2, Governor looking for three-sided trick shot on budget. Governor Jerry Brown proposed a delicate trick shot Monday to balance California's budget. Persuade Democrats to slash social services. Ask Republicans to place taxes on the ballot. Then persuade voters to pay additional money for 5 more years. Bloomberg gives us Christie may cut Medicaid as $10.5 billion New Jersey budget deficit looms. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie gives his first State of the State speech tomorrow after saying he may cut Medicaid and other employee benefits to eliminate a $10.5 billion budget deficit in the second wealthiest U.S. state. Might be wealthy, but they don't seem to be able to afford Medicaid. Wall Street Journal, Bernanke rejects bailouts. Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke on Friday ruled out a central bank bailout of state and local governments strapped with big municipal debt burdens, saying the Fed had limited legal authority to help and little will to use the authority that it did have. Ben is saying, "Don't look at me." Of Two Minds, Charles Hugh Smith. Article Bernanke, Goldilocks and the Red Queen. This is the must-read article of this series. Basically, he's saying that the asset deflation will trump Bernanke's asset pumping power. And especially if you lot then start wagging your fingers at the Fed saying, no more, no more. CBS Chicago, stalemate on income tax debate. Lawmakers in Springfield still cannot come to an agreement on whether to increase the state income tax before the new Illinois General Assembly is sworn in later this week. Credit write-downs. Brazil underscores commitment to weakening the Brazilian currency. I gave you some information a couple of days ago that this is what they were up to. This is extra. Brazil announced that it is allowing its sovereign wealth fund to trade currencies and currency derivatives. The sovereign wealth fund is managed by the Treasury, and so this gives the authorities another channel through which it can try and affect exchange rates. Eve Smith, in comments on the Ibanez case, she's pushing this Ibanez case and how important it might be. Many people have different positions on it. This is just part of one of her comment replies. The party who has the note ought to be able to foreclose, but that ain't the trust, and no one wants other than the trust to foreclose. There is no way to assign the mortgage to the trust now. It runs tons of legal and tax risks. Even in cases where that might be possible, intermediary entities that are bankrupt or liquidated make it impossible in many cases. And there is no way to get the dollars from a foreclosure outside the trust to the trust. I know this is complicated, but I'm just reading these out to say that these complicated things are going on and none of them are good. She finishes with, foreclosures outside the trust would be proof that the RMBS were non-mortgage-backed securities. The consequences to that market would be devastating. Why do you think the ASF is running such ridiculous arguments to try and claim that everything is fine, nothing to see here? The reality that many, if not virtually all trusts have no clear ability to foreclose if challenged, is what they are desperate not to have exposed. Now, I'll just give you a quick heads up. Most of you are thinking on the front end of this, whether you were foreclosed on, is it right, and all that sort of thing. Most of the important talk is behind the scenes about these mortgage-backed securities and whether the things that were in them, cut up and tranched and sold on, whether they were actually in there or not, and if they were not legally in there, what was actually being sold, and would all of that have to be unwound? There's one huge state budget crisis that everyone is refusing to talk about. Still in the United States, you know the story, and you know the names. States like Illinois, New Jersey, New York, and California are supposed to be in huge financial trouble thanks to bloated governments, business-unfriendly regulations, and strong public sector unions. After a crisis-free 2010, investors are expected to punish these hotbeds of bad governments in muni bond market rout, at least if pundits like Meredith Whitney are correct. But there's one state which is fairly high up on the list of trouble states that nobody is talking about, and there's a reason for it. The state is Texas. This month, the state's part-time legislature goes back into session, and the state is starting at potentially a $25 billion deficit on a 2-year budget of around $95 billion, and that is enormous. And there's not much fat to cut. The whole budget is basically education and healthcare spending. Cutting anything else wouldn't do the trick, and though raising this kind of money would be easy on an economy of $1.2 trillion, the GOP mega-majority in Congress is firmly against raising any revenue. It's all very tricky. This is Steve Keen from Australia commenting on Mish's blog. Australia got out of the crisis in 2009 by exploiting the upside of this factor. If you can encourage people into debt, then aggregate demand grows as debt accelerates. So even slowing down the rate of deleveraging gives a positive boost to demand. This stuff is a bit hard to get one's head round, but it's correct and aligns with the impact of investors on aggregate demand. That's how the USA looked a bit better in recent months. You slowed down deleveraging, but since Australia went from marginal deleveraging to re-leveraging, the acceleration in debt was all the more extreme. We had an apparent boom. That appears to be ending now, since through the credit impulse is still positive on a yearly basis. It turned negative the last few months, so this should be a leading indicator of an unexpected, don't you love the word in the mainstream, slowdown in Australia. So watch that Aussie, this POM saying that one of your boys says that you're in for a slowdown, and if you start slowing down, the chances are you'll slip down an awful long way. And that's about it. And that is about it. You stop spending, the economy goes all the way down. So where's all the money going to come from to stop the economy going into reverse? That is the big problem that the people in charge have, because there ain't not enough spare money to pump in now that you lot are not borrowing anymore. You lot borrow or the whole thing goes down. Take your choice.